so many things for me to do as we go ahead here. Bina, what
Yes.
was our
Hello.
and then she gets distracted. But I think in the meantime, yeah, I shall put on the kettle. Anybody want some coffee or tea? I'm happy to make tea as well.
Yes.
Just
Okay.
please say in comments. Ramsey, would you like some tea or coffee? Norma, would you like some tea or coffee? Bina, I'm gonna make Bina tea whether she wants some or not. I'll make her tea.
Thank you.
Yeah. I like making Bina tea or coffee, but I think Bina. So Ryan, Jessica, that's right, Jessica. Yeah, sure.
Elizabeth, somehow I cannot do tag her. So you have to do
Oh,
that.
maybe you're not friends with Elizabeth then.
Yes. So I cannot do
Well,
that. So
I think you are, but not with Elizabeth interested because she has another name too.
it
So
never
you have to
appears
be.
for me. So
Yeah. So you need to now that you see the tag there, click on it and then send a friend request to Elizabeth Entrusted because I think you're friends with the other one. Oh, yeah, Norma's gonna have something. Oh, yeah, that makes me very happy. Just to make you some tea, that's a
oh,
great joy.
okay.
So Ramsey's already having his coffee and black too. Yeah. See now, when I do this, Ramsey. Oh, I see. Consume maintenance is here. All right, sure. All right. Okay. All right. Oh. Let's just put out there. Ramsey, if you were here physically, then if I make coffee or tea, I make a big effort to find out exactly how you like it. So the first time, all right, you say maybe black, no sugar. Let's just say for argument's sake, but that's not all there is to coffee. Then I'll find out, is it too strong, is it too weak, and so on and so forth, right? Now, if you do take sugar and milk or whatever, then I'll say how much exactly, because like there's a difference between taking 3 teaspoons of sugar and three and a third and 3.5, right? So I like to get it exactly precise, right? So I make that effort to find out. It's just something that I'm mentioning as part of friendship, that it's a great joy to make things for others that is exactly right how they like it, right? And it's oh, I see. All right, wonderful show. Oh, brilliant. Okay, so getting it precisely right, for me at least, it's a great joy, because then you're doing it the way they would do it for themselves, and taking that time and effort to find out exactly. It's something that I found that few do, and I also find that if you don't get it exactly right, and then it sort of takes away from the joy of doing it. Like I know sometimes people make me, I'd rather make it myself. The benefit of this is not any good, yeah, because it's not nice. So it's an important thing, right? Just to have that. Wow, I don't have sugar and carbs for 7 years now. Wow. Okay, well, that explains a lot. That is here, but I hope that's good. I hope that's good, Ramsey.
That explains a lot that some people cannot give.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh no,
yeah,
that explains a
yeah,
lot that some
yeah,
people cannot give up sugar for 7 hours.
yeah, yeah, maybe. But some people's brains run on sugar, so what can I tell you? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and my brain is
Yes.
very active, and it does a lot of work, and it does a good job at it. So I keep eating it, so it works for me.
So does Ramses and so does ours. So yes, okay. But we have
Yes,
a different
yes.
arrangement for that.
Correct,
And you have such a-
correct. We're all individuals. I've got monkey in me. You read somewhere once upon a time that how come primates the root for evolution is because of it. Well, primates obviously evolved from the monkeys, but it was from the monkeys specifically, because they went into the trees, and because they had the stuff, and they started eating the fruit in the fruit trees, and the sugar is of the fruit is what leverage their brains and put them into this
So
high gear. And
fructose,
then, of
not
course, the prime.
not sugar necessarily, but
Right, I
fructose.
know fructose. Right, yeah, yeah. Right, right, right,
Okay. So
right.
yes. Shall we read now? Start reading.
We shall. Well, I like
Okay.
that. Shall we? Very, very formal, very formal. Shall we read? Yes, we shall.
Okay. My I learned this language by reading. So
Mm.
just give me a bit of freedom to be formal because this is how I learned this language. Anyway,
I love it. I love it. I love it. It's fantastic. Yeah.
Biella and the new nobility. Understood from briefing, the name agglomeration had something to do with the new nobility? Ursula was saying. Yes,
Mm.
Biella replied. During the first conference of worlds, many of the new nobility were present, although they weren't present on most of the worlds then, as they are now. Biella continued. They were the new nobility, completely different to the ancient nobility, which had long since ceased to be effective. The conference had gone well, all the major points had been agreed upon, yet all of a sudden, when it came to naming the new grouping of words, it all broke down.
Mm. Well, that's no good. We can't have that, right, Bina?
Yes.
Sorry, no, not acceptable. Not acceptable, conference attendees, delegates. This will not be tolerated.
But this is the freedom of being and freedom of
Yeah,
speech also.
yeah, yeah. When it comes to agreements, and especially when you have a large diversity, it of course can be very difficult when you have participants, members, those involved who aren't willing to compromise, right? And this was the situation here. That no one was really willing to compromise, so they vetoed the names because they had veto power on the name, right? Each world had the ability to veto. It doesn't mean that the name chosen had to be unanimous or majority. Well, it had to be majority, but well, not necessarily majority. I mean, let's say there was 100 worlds joining, and only 30 voted for the name, but 70 just abstained. Well, all right, then that would go through. Yeah. But
Mm.
but also though there was a provision, and you find this often in conferences of this nature, that I might not say no, but I can veto it, which is a different thing. Yes, which
Mhm.
means that your veto blocks it out of hand, right? Rather than just saying no, which a majority can still say, all right, let's say 60 say yes, 40 say no, it goes through. But if you had 60 go through, 39 say no, and one vetoes it, if it's a true veto, that cancels the whole thing, right? Vetoes can be very, very powerful. So we have to understand this power of veto. And the reason this comes in is because the new nobility in their things. I'm giving a little extra background here, right? If we think about the new nobility as a society predicated on moreness, yes, around this concept of being noble is a major part of it, but it's not the only part, right? It's of course impeccability. You can't have nobility as your core without impeccability. Well, you can't really have anything without as your core without impeccability, except foolishness and nonsense, right? So, but also in moreness, in other words, they really think about things, right? In any way, shape, or form. And part of their impeccability and their nobility is due respect. Yes. So in their society, when they come to group decisions, it's just part of their system that everyone has a veto. It's not majority rule. Yes. Sometimes, like I said before, I don't have to have a more than 50%.
They spread themselves unobtrusively throughout the assembly. Merely with subtle eye contact and body language, they were preparing, anticipating the moment of frustration. the deadlock when no more proposals were available.
All right. So for the eagle-eyed out there, for the astute,
Raise of her eyebrow accompanied this. Their research surely must have had them prepared. That was the unusualness of the situation, Biella replied.
right? And there, Biella, nah, that's an American thing. Who wants to be in a federation? That's Americans. They like federal. See? So can you think up more names? If we were to literally, us now, let's say we are delegates from the various countries that we're from here, right? I mean, between those of us here, we're representing 4 or 5 different countries already, right? I mean, all of us, right? Let's assume now, okay, I'm in America now, but let's say I'm assuming I represent South Africa here, right? So of all those here, there's no 2 people from the same country, which is quite amazing. So we're all delegates. We're all delegates starting this new grouping of all the countries of the world in a grouping together that's going to basically run the world, right? So like the European Union, but like a worldwide European Union. But we don't want to call it union again because, well, European Union, I just forgot about that. I said Russian. All right. So we can't use union. So can you think of other terms that we could use beside agglomeration? Agglomeration really makes more sense for planets. It doesn't quite work for countries, but yeah.
Yes,
I,
but
what's
yeah.
that? Go ahead,
No,
go
I
ahead,
was
go ahead.
thinking that okay, maybe because in English that would be difficult. But if we try something in some other language, but then it will
Yes,
become ethnicity issue that okay,
exactly,
so then
exactly,
it's going to be
exactly,
because English is almost a universal language. So
exactly,
by every
exactly. English is interesting. It's not the most spoken language, that is Mandarin, but it is the most widely spoken language. I actually think if I remember correctly, I think there may even be more Spanish speakers than English speakers. But English is by far the most commonly spoken language and commonly understood one. So it is definitely the lingua franca. Now, that's an interesting little side point here. Why is it called the term common language or, most widely spoken is referred to as lingua franca? Because franca meaning like in the French, right? Because when countries started to become countries and passports and diplomacy and all of this stuff started to become a real thing, particularly with passports, right, which is a fairly recent thing. I think passports only came like in the 1800s, right? And I'll tell you another interesting fact about passports in a moment. The French were very involved in this, and they made a big effort, a big push to have French be the language of diplomacy, the language of diplomats, right? And if you go and look at your passport, even today, right, it will say passport in French in there, and it will have French in your passport. Besides your local language, like in your case, Bina, it would be Urdu, and then
yes,
English as well,
yes.
right? In some cases, it may only be your local language and French. So they tried very hard, but they didn't really succeed, and English is won out. But it still lingers, this thing of French being the language of diplomacy, and they
Mhm.
made a real big push for it. The other interesting fact about passports, when passports first came out, right? And I believe it was in the 1800s, may have been in the 1700s, but whenever it was, they would say, okay, so, and he's got, this high, tall, brown hair, blue eyes, beard, a gray beard, red shirt, and, well, they wouldn't say the shirt, but coat. Well, they would put your coat and your shoes on your passport because people really only had one coat and one pair of shoes, even wealthy. That's it. You were known by it was so identifiable, your coat, it was on your passport. Isn't that fascinating?
Oh yes.
It was part of your personal description. It's a bit naive, of course, but I mean, there obviously were people who had more than one coats, but they were in a supreme minority. But it was a actual way you could identify people. Yeah. fascinating. Yeah. Con-creation, in what context? Not co-creation, Norma says, but con-creation. Wow.
Yes, in reference of agglomeration.
A name, a con-creation. Yeah, a conclave. But a conclave is a different meaning. But a con-creation, that's the con-creation of nations. It's a little sticky to say, right? Con-creation. Right? I like the idea, and it's definitely moving in the right direction. But when we think of names like this, and we see like if we were literally to look to replace the United Nations, to find a name is very, very difficult. Like you said, it kind of has to default into English. There's no way around that, and I know many countries are going to object to this, but it's somewhat unavoidable. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. No, I love it, Norma, because now you are con-creation. Ah, man. And see, my mind jumped to conclave. But man, I like where you're going, Norma. It's almost there, but this is part of brainstorming. You throw out bad ideas because ideas lead to ideas. Bad or good doesn't matter. In brainstorming, there's no bad or good. It's just stimulation. Later on, and then actually, if you're doing formal brainstorming, you write all the ideas down, and then you let it stimulate, and then you don't have, and then later only when all the brain emphasis and the sparking and the connecting and that's all done and everybody's run out of steam and you've got this big, you have somebody on a big like a whiteboard or sheet of paper, right, with multiple sheets, and they write it down and they fold it over and they get the next one, right? So you can just putting down all these ideas like crazy. Then you go back and say, okay, pros and cons, and you say, okay, con-creation, let's see what's the pros, what's the cons. Well, one of the cons is a little difficult to pronunciate, etc. Okay, but it had creation in there, and con was like as in conglomeration. So can we maybe say something else? Creation, like well, co-creation, but co-creation, this implies like some artistic endeavor. You see, or a confabulation, co-creation, confabulation. Confabulation. Well, that's like, telling stories. But you see what I mean, though, Bina? It starts to stimulate the mind. It starts to stimulate the mind. So,
Yes. Yes.
so this is, it's really interesting, and it may actually quite literally be why there hasn't been a replacement for United Nations, because they couldn't find a better name. Now, United Nations is an update on the previous incarnation. Anybody know? Bonus points for history. Everybody know what the previous incarnation was called before United Nation? It's got a more oldie worldy name. It was called the League of Nations.
What?
Yeah. Before it was United Nations, it was called the League of Nations. And so after the Second World War, they said, no, the League of Nations not working, obviously, because we had the Second World War. So they had to update the League of Nations, and it became the United Nations. But league, like, the Gentleman's League or the League of Gentlemen or whatever, league is that Victorian 1800s, has got
Yeah.
that connotation, right? And it came from the First World War, so League of Nations, yeah? So just fun. Names are very important. Names are very, very important. So, yeah. So, I would say probably something, just to call it for what it is, world government. Yeah. Yeah, instead of saying you put all together, shift it rather than making it into a club and association. Just say, okay, it's world government. Call it world government. Very simple. Name it for exactly what it is, what it does, right? Yeah, yeah. Isn't that fascinating? You prefer which one, world government or League of Nations?
League of Nation, I guess.
Yeah, me too. Me too. I'm guessing too. So I love it. I love it, Norma. I love it.
So
Yeah.
I was just a side note from that, astrologically, that few things are just happening. They are not just in literal way. They are not just few things, because they are
Mm,
so
mm,
intense, and of course big transitions. And one of the people I was talking with, They said that okay, soon we are going to have this one government, and especially or like okay, it will be initiated first in terms of health. So and they are going to pass some rules and some measures to actually create one rule for the whole world in terms of health, like health policies,
Wow.
healthcare, and everything. So they are going to start step by step, and most likely this year we are going to see and hear some news about the one government.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Now, in this world government, you got World Health Organization, right? Now, I would actually propose, instead of saying world government, to call it something like global admin rather than world, right? Because when you say world, I don't know, it's rather than global, like if you're saying something is global, it means that whatever you are deciding and doing, it's going to have an effect all around. Right? Whereas if you say world, you're saying I'm more directly in charge and in control, rather than as it's something that starts here and has a global consequence, right? So by the word global, you're bringing consequence into the point. And by shifting it from government, which is telling you what to do, being in charge, power, authority, admin. Oh, we're gonna have a global admin. Oh, who wants to be the main person in charge of admin? Put up your hands, please. No, I want to be the leader. I want to be in charge. I don't want to be admin. That's boring. That's a bureaucrat. So you take your hand down, right? So by saying global admin rather than world, and world has got status. Global is like, well, wind is global, weather is global, how things are global, all very uncool things, right? So in other words, I'm making this unappealing for the BMNs. Titles are critically important to BMNs. So if now your actual world governance is called global admin, you're also going to put in your constitution, hey, it's more administrative than policy making and all this. Yes, that's going to come into it. But you're going to define that ahead of time in your constitution to say, do this, and it's just administering of this. So you take out all of the desire, the lust, and the lure for the BMNs, for the narcissists and the power hungry, right? It's like, man, who wants to be admin? Yeah. Okay. Doesn't mean they won't be there, but it's reducing it considerably. So when we have that as part of a name, something like global admin becomes very, very powerful. And you also don't want it to be something that's so much in the big focus that this is where all your importance is. No, you can put your importance on your local governances, and that's where you want to make a name and be all that. Okay, fine. But we're going to have global admin. Let's take care of all your nonsense, right? So you can have whatever idiot policies that you want to and pretend to have them, but you're going to have to take care of the global stuff. Like, for instance, in America, you got some states that try and make up their own nonsense stuff, but they have to pay attention to the federal laws which override their state laws. Now, not always, but in some cases, right? So, okay, the politicians can feel good about themselves and they know it's going to be invalidated by the federal laws. And so they can get all their huff and puff and nonsense out of their system. But in the end, it doesn't matter, right? So same thing with global admin. Go ahead, do whatever you do. And, but this is it. And then the politicians say, well, I tried, but hey, it's like, that's just the system. I'm in a minority, blah, 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 whatever. They can excuse it, right? So when we take this deeper psychology into account, something like admin becomes very powerful. Yeah, I actually quite like that, global admin, because I think it's a lot easier to sell to the different countries. United Nations, this is in that old paradigm, who's in charge, who's going to tell who what to do. But you're saying, look, we need global admin because many of these problems overlap, like pollution. Pollution isn't just something that happens in your country. You may have very strict, nice pollution laws, anti-pollution laws, but then your neighbor doesn't, and all the smoke and stuff blows out into your country. What about GMO stuff with seeds and stuff like this? Same thing, right? In America, it's not that much of a problem because most of America is in a continent, and only the stuff near the borders of Canada and Mexico will affect them. But in a place like Europe, which is pretty small, boy, it takes one country there, and you get one big storm, and whatever seeds get spread, it infects all of Europe, right? Europe is not a continent, by the way; it's part of Asia. When I was a kid at school, and they made the continents, and they said, Europe. I always laughed. I thought this was most amusing, and I said, "How arrogant are you, and self-important that you have to call yourself a continent when clearly, geologically, you are not a continent. You're just a peninsula, maybe, to Asia." Anyway, it's just my little point there. But still, my point is that there are many things that require global admin: passports, trade, tariffs, all of this stuff, currency, right? When you're going to say, "Hey, we're going to switch to a global currency," you're going to have global admin. I mean, there's so much inefficiency with having different currencies. You're paying extra money for nothing. It's just wasteful, right? And if that goes away, it's more money for the people. So many, many reasons for global admin. And at first, it can start with things that are already needing some sort of, like the postal system. The postal system is an international cooperative system, right? Isn't that fantastic? Isn't that
Yes.
fantastic? So if it can be done with the postal system, there's a necessity for it. Why can't it be done with other things? Yeah, that also need this. Like I said, like currency, passport, travel, tariffs, weather, health, pollution, seeds, things like this, right? Lots of these. So again, you're starting on those things that need it, and then it just goes more and more and more, and eventually it takes over. So get in there subtly, right? Get in there subtly. Make sense?
Yes.
I like it. I like it. Okay.
Yes.
All right. All right. Brilliant. So let's go to the next one here.
Okay.
Or if you saw another new noble with a plan, how would you participate? And this is just taking cues from things, a bit complicated to go into without having everybody here to discuss. It's difficult to share in comments. Does the plan and the actions of the new noble, the one who started, make sense? Do they fit? And do you see them as feasible? This is very important. So let me ask you this, and I want to know from Norma and Ramsey if Ramsey's still here. I hope so, and sure, if Sher's still here too. That do you think that this plan of theirs, I mean, the way the story is written, and do you think it's feasible, or does it just say, so that's all nice and well in your story, but in reality, I don't know if this would have worked. I'm keen to know if you think it's actually feasible, right? In the full meaning of the word feasible. That if this was like seriously, this was a conference here for this global admin, and this had come about, and that we weren't going to have global admin simply because we couldn't find a name. And then, some bright spark came along and said, "Hey, why don't we just call it global admin?" Yeah. And they would say, "Yeah, that's just a ticket." And the same process happens, right? Do you think it's feasible? I'm keen to know. I'm keen to know. What about you, Bina? You think it's feasible?
Okay, so this is very interesting because when I think of new nobility and new nobles, the word feasible is something doesn't resonate with me. Like, oh,
Oh,
do
oh,
they really do something just because of this reason? Not
because of which
necessarily.
reason?
Are you
Because
there?
of which reason? Yeah. When you say do they, meaning the new nobility, do they do things because of which reasons? I'm here. I'm here. I can hear you, Bina. No, now I'm not hearing you. Hang on. Let me stop screen sharing. I see your yellow box, but I'm not hearing you, Bina. Bina, let's try again. I think so, says Norma, but for what period of time? Well, yeah, Bina dropped. I think in our reality now, Norma, like literally, if we were to go to a conference, right? You, the delegate for Britain, let's assume for whatever reason they don't go by politics. They have a lottery and they just draw a random person because politics is broken down and we can't trust the politicians. And they're going to say, well, we're just going to send a citizen. And as long as you've got an education, you've got a GED, whatever, you can go, right? So anybody, we just going to have to trust, because random person is better than the negative politicians that we have, and the corrupt and the ego and all this. So we'll just take our chance with a random person. So we randomly get selected, you and me and Sher and Bina and Ramsey, for argument's sake, right? And of course other random people. And we all go together, and there's all these delegates from all around the world. Now, some of them are going to be BMNs and egotists, because it's a random grouping of people in the world. And this is the paradigm. And some are going to be in there for power and greed and whatever reason, right? Others will genuinely, like us, want to have the thing work and all that. So if we were in this conference and it break down because of a lack of a name, and we representing the new nobility contingent, even though we're from different countries, we activated this, right? And we spread out, and we were queued and said, okay, and you put forth this name and all this, right? So we can definitely think of it in this time period now. Yeah, I feel so too, Norma. I understand how people work and operate. And people are much more easily cued than they would like to acknowledge. I see it all the time, how people are cued. And this is a big topic that I want to bring up. Queuing, but not today, and another day. And how we give license, and how we assume those in charge make sense, and all sorts of stuff like this. It's got to do with trust. So maybe tomorrow I'll bring that up. So I definitely I think Ramsey has dropped off as well. So yeah, I definitely, I do agree. I do think it's feasible also. What all do you think about Ursula's comments about manipulation or guiding, and what all is implied, both in the context of the conference and relative to Biella and their interaction? So a nice complex question too. And, just to elaborate on this, Ursula's comments are careful and considerate, and she is exploring because she wants to know more. Because from that story, if you don't know the new nobility, you could very easily come to, at least so far, right? Because we haven't gotten to the part yet where they go now and explain what they did. If it was only up to this point where they've succeeded in the name and everybody's going towards the exits and they all disperse, up until this point, it's all manipulation, right? You can see it as pure manipulation, and you could start to question the motives and the politics and the ethics of the new nobility, right? So when Ursula asks, she wants to say, wait a second, if I'm going to be joining and getting my planet to join the agglomeration, and the new nobility is the philosophical core of the agglomeration, man, I need to know that manipulation isn't going to be the key point here. So this is a very important point that she needs clarity on. So her comments are about getting clarity, and she is naming something like manipulation, which those that might not be quite as bold and as confident and as self-assured as Ursula might be a bit reluctant to name, because if you're saying, well, they manipulated the conference, she said it as a fact. Not as a question, not as a debated point, not as a, well, sounds like they manipulated. See, that's where you could have said, she said it as a fact, because there is no way that you can avoid saying that they manipulated this. This is just absolutely what happened, yes. However, it is a moreness to it rather than a lessness to it. So a comment is very skilled in its capital D diplomacy, in other words. Very, very powerful. Very, very powerful. Very cool. Very cool. Showing Bean is still online, but whatever reason, Zoom is being difficult. Too wonderful. Too wonderful. So, all right, we'll leave it on this task and exercise. I like the tasks and exercises are like natural breaks in the story. At least there's a little bit of a break there. So we'll leave it there for today. And sorry, Bina, I am keen to hear what you said, but I don't know how long Bina's going to be away. So we're going to leave it right there. Yes. Right on the nose, 12 o'clock. Not that we have to stick to time. It just happens to be that we talked about punctuality earlier today, Norma. And you see, I started at exactly 10 o'clock and we'll end at exactly 12. All right. See you tomorrow. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye, Norma. Bye-bye, Norma. Love you, Norma, too. Love you, love you, love you. Bye-bye, bye-bye. Oh, my pleasure, Norma. Absolutely. Always my pleasure. Bye-bye, bye-bye, bye-bye. Be with moreness, Norma. Be with Norma.